My girlfriend of 2 years cheated, and I didn't find out till she was engaged 3 months later, but I got the last laugh. I met my ex when we were both attending college. I was 24 and she was 22. I had never really dated much before her. I had just gotten out of a toxic year-long relationship that didn't work, but we were amicable. The other girl was seriously depressed. I loved her, but she was so overwhelmingly depressed I could do anything. I consider myself an empath, and her depression would seep into me. So I broke it off. My ex was the one that sort of approached me as we were both living in the same apartment complex. I had gone out of my way to help her a few times, but she asked for a ride, and that was what sparked the friendship, then relationship. I would spend hours with her, whether she was at home or closing at the sandwich store she worked at. She was taking time off from school due to depression and a failed engagement from a year or so ago. Though as far as I know, she never finished school, period, and transferred twice to other universities. We partially bonded over her story about how she had been betrayed and cheated on by her ex, though I now question how much of the story was true. We became inseparable. She introduced me to her parents only after 2 months of friends with benefits. After a few months, I wanted her to become my girlfriend since I simply had no interest in other girls aside from her. She declined, saying she wasn't ready because of her past engagement. This should have been my first red flag, but I, like the idiot I was, gave her a pass. We continued dating exclusively. She didn't date anyone else and neither did I. A month later, I brought up our status again because if we were exclusive anyway, why not just admit what we were? She continued to fight it. There were times during our relationship where things seemed perfect. She seemed to like everything I liked. She had similar goals, and we just seemed like a perfect match. But sometimes, I would notice backhand remarks about me. She would sometimes compare me and talk about her different exes. We would sometimes fight over such a small thing, and I would try to de-escalate it, but she wouldn't have it. She would run out of my apartment, and at times, I would chase after her. She would become angry that I did that, saying I should give her space. So the next time she did that, I wouldn't chase after her, and then she would accuse me of not caring about her. She also began to gaslight me about certain things I remembered her saying, though at the time I didn't know what gaslighting was. But like a sucker in love, I went with it. Many of my friends would remark to me when I spoke about her that I could do better, that she didn't treat me right, but I just brushed it off. People, listen to your friends. They usually are looking out for you. After dating for a year, I would still bring up becoming official boyfriend-girlfriend, but she was still resilient. She would still say she wasn't ready, but I was the best guy she had ever dated. All of her friends knew we were dating, but to be honest, I didn't like them. She would invite me to hang out with them, but they were very cliche-ish, and I'm not like that. Also, they had a cat, and I'm allergic, so I would use that as an excuse. As time went on, we would go on dates. She would call me every night, and we would stay on the phone all night until one of us woke up the next day. She said due to her depression, I was comforting and helped her sleep. We continued to have problems at times where she would even get physical. She slapped me hard on 2 occasions. Both were not because we were fighting, but because she thought it would be funny. Each time I told her that was disrespectful, and that since I would never do that to her, I expected the same in return. During one of our fights, she once stated, "My roommate knows all the guys that would be willing to be non-committal makeouts in the complex, so I don't really need you." But finally, after a little over a year of dating, she gave in and decided to be girlfriend-boyfriend. But I noticed that she seemed to keep it secret to everyone except her family. I thought it was weird, but seeing as I had gotten what I wanted, I paid no attention to it. I'm going to butt this in here and say there were times I wasn't a perfect significant other. I also deal with depression, and the stress of work, school, family, and her became too much at times. I lashed out, but never hurt her. I would point out the things she had done that were hurtful to me. We broke up several times. Sometimes I would break up with her, and sometimes she would break up with me. But each time, one of us would relent and come back to the other. One time, I was a bit manipulative and self-harmed to show her how much it was hurting me. She had also self-harmed and expressed being suicidal during us dating, and to be totally honest, I got the idea from her. I was truly in love with her. She told me she was with me. We discussed marriage, children, where we would live, etc. During this time, she moved twice. First to an apartment down the street, and then to her parents' house, about an hour north. During when she lived in the apartment down street, she threw a party. When it was over, none of her friends stayed to help clean, just me. She told me this was proof I'd be a good husband. After her move to her parents, I would visit her almost weekly, but I began to notice a bit of distance at times. She was replying slower and slower to my texts and calls, but if she called or texted me, she expected a quick reply. Whenever she needed me, I would come to her, even at 1 a.m. in the morning when I had work and school the next day. After a couple of months, I began to suggest getting engaged, but then she started to do the same thing she had done with being girlfriend-boyfriend. She would use her depression from her past relationship as an excuse. And then she asked if we could go back to casually dating. This was the dumbest thing I had ever done. I said it was okay. I thought this would show her that I was the guy for her. Over the next few months, she would go on dates, but she would tell me about them and tell me how much better I was than them. I continued to not date because I was a sap in love with her, but I had told her if she found someone she wanted to pursue, I would end our relationship and she could go after him. But then, after talking to my friends and family, I had a realization that I was doing all this for her when she wasn't even my girlfriend anymore. So I told her and she agreed that any physical relationship would end until we got back to being exclusive. Except it didn't. We would go on dates and she would guilt me, pressure me, and I would give in. She would then immediately afterwards become angry, saying, "Why couldn't you resist? Why didn't I stop her?" She became very abusive and hurtful. The worst was when she told me that if she got pregnant, she would never tell me and only she would decide what to do then. That hurt so much, as I've wanted to be a father and would never leave my children alone. But I would simply fight with her and we'd end up making up. During all of this, we would continue to talk about a future together. She would see a mixed baby, I'm Latino and she was white, and say how she saw the cutest baby that could have been our baby. Whenever she was depressed, she would call me or ask me, "Would you still marry me?" And I would respond, "Of course I would. I love you." It wasn't until Christmas when I was in Florida visiting my brother that I began to suspect something more was up. I'd text her. She wouldn't respond. I'd call her to do the phone thing at night, but she wouldn't answer. But one time, she called and asked if I had a specific movie on DVD, and when I asked why, she said, "I wanted to watch it with my family." But I could sense something was off. When I came back from vacation and started the new semester of school, she came to visit me. Sort of. She came to my university for some reason and lost her Fitbit and called me to help her. I came to help and we spent some time together, but I could feel something was different. She then told me she wanted me to come visit her in 2 days at her parents' house as she had something to talk to me about. It was then I knew what was coming. I talked to some of my friends and prepared for the worst. When I got to her parents' house, it was late. She asked me to come at 10 p.m. She came into my car and we talked for about 30 minutes to an hour. She told me that she no longer wanted to date me, and I agreed. I told her I had felt her becoming distant, and I asked her if it was someone else. She denied there was something else. She said she simply no longer felt we were right for each other. But then she said other things. She said that she never considered me husband material, that she never saw us getting married, having kids, that she had always known from the beginning. She even said another reason she didn't want to be with me was that her kids would look like her because of her being white and me being Latino. This is especially funny now because she likes to say how progressive and not racist she is. Right. This shocked me. I remembered back to all the plans we made, all the times she asked if I would marry her, all the times she had talked about our hypothetical children. That hurt the most. I told her I loved her, but that I agreed we were done. We decided on no contact. She decided to block me on Facebook, saying she knew if I blocked her, I wouldn't be able to keep her blocked, so she would be the one to do it. I said fine. We didn't end up blocking each other on our phones in case of an emergency. I had no family in state. As I drove away, I felt sad, but also felt as if a huge burden was lifted from me. For the next month, it was an uphill battle. I would be depressed at night. I realized she had made me codependent on her. I had become accustomed to her nightly phone calls. I felt very alone. There were many nights on the floor of my room in tear-filled agony, but I threw myself into my work, my school, and my friends. But then, about a month later, I got a call from her early in the morning. I answered thinking it was an emergency. It wasn't. It seemed as if she had butt dialed me, but that didn't make sense. We hadn't spoken in a month. What were the chances of her accidentally calling me? I could hear a conversation, but only bits and pieces. I could hear her voice, but also a voice I didn't recognize. It was definitely a guy. I heard something about snow, and I swear I heard my name mentioned, but then the call ended. I know I shouldn't have, but I reached out to a few friends and heard she had started dating someone. I then reached out to her. I know I shouldn't have, and asked if she was alright. It took a few days for her to respond. She then said she had butt dialed me, but she had wanted to speak to me. She said she really missed my friendship, and for a few minutes, we spoke as if nothing had changed. She told me she had started seeing someone. I told her I had heard, and she asked how, and I told her from friends. But then I had seen a picture of the guy. She began talking about him and about his flaws. I just listened, but I began to feel weird about it. She then spoke about his hair being weird, and I responded, yeah, it is a bit. But I guess she had been speaking about his hair years ago, and then began to question how I knew what his hair looked like back then. I responded, sorry, I thought you were talking about now. She then told me that she had recently been getting a lot of random friend requests on Facebook, and she asked if they were me. They weren't. We ended the conversation shortly after, and I began to have a weird feeling about it. I was sort of happy for her, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to continue talking to her. I messaged her the next day and said that, while I enjoyed talking to you like we used to, I don't think we should speak again. She agreed. I then proceeded to block her number. A week later, while on campus, I noticed I had a voicemail, even though my phone hadn't rang. It was from her asking if I was home. She came to drop some things off. I personally felt like there wasn't anything worth her returning, and it pissed me off that she had come and dropped the stuff off at my front door since no one was home. I became really annoyed. I had told her no contact anymore. I then decided to write her an email. I told her basically that I had loved her with all my heart, but that she had mistreated me in a lot of ways, lied to me, etc. I told her to thank her parents for being kind to me. We had a rather good relationship, and they actively told me how amazing a boyfriend I was. I then proceeded to tell her I want no contact of any kind, that she was now blocked from my phone. I said though we live about an hour away now, it would be possible to run into each other due to friends living close to me and such. I told her, the way you treat me is how I will treat you if we see each other. If you treat me like a friend, I'll treat you like a friend. If you treat me like an enemy, I'll treat you like an enemy. If you treat me like I don't exist, I'll treat you like you don't exist. I sent the email and didn't expect to ever hear back from her. Boy, was I wrong. A few days later, I received a reply from her dad. Her dad, mind you, is an ex-Marine and a lawyer. In his email, he stated that I should leave his daughter alone. He accused me of stalking her, not sure how I was, seeing as I was an hour away and busy with school, work, and friends. He accused me of creating fake Facebook accounts and cyber stalking her. Once again, I didn't create any to do that. Though I had looked at her account from a friend's account a few times, but that was it. I mean, who hasn't? But then he used the line about treating her the way she treats me, and he highlighted that part and said, I consider this a threat. He proceeded to tell me to leave her alone, otherwise he would get a restraining order. I was blown away. Her dad and I had always been on good terms. I just couldn't believe what I was reading. I spoke to a few people, and having studied a bit of law in university, responded to him. I told him, look, I want nothing to do with your daughter. She was the one who reinitiated contact. In fact, she came to my house without my knowledge a week ago. If I'm a stalker, why would she risk coming to my house? I told him that we both know what he had said was unsubstantiated and no judge would ever give them a restraining order. I told him never contact me again and I'll do the same to him and his daughter. It was then that I wondered what the is going on. What stories was she telling people about me? What sob tale is she spinning and why? I told some of my friends about what happened and they were blown away too. They just told me that I dodged a nuke and I should be happy. I thought the story would end there, but like I said, this is a cheating story. A long one, but a cheating story nonetheless. So we had broken up in January. Just after the first week of April, a friend of mine messaged me while I was working and told me that my ex had just gotten engaged. I was floored. It had only been 3 months. For the girl that had constantly said how hard relationships had been for her because of her cheating, abusive ex-fiance, it just didn't make sense. But what was interesting, my friend told me, was a comment that someone had put on her announcement. This person was congratulating her on her engagement and so happy she could help them get together back in November. November. The same November when we were still going out. Yes, weren't exclusive at that point, but to me, since I had given her several outs and she lied about there being someone else, I consider that cheating. I was livid. And then everything came into place. That's why she became distant at Christmas. That's who she wanted to watch the movies with. That hurt, but I got on with my life. I was still having depression issues, trust issues. I spoke about it to some people, friends, church people, but the more I spoke about it, the more I learned about her. People who had known her and didn't know we had dated came out and said, yeah, that girl had issues. They told me things they probably shouldn't have told me, but whatever. I found out all the nasty things she said about other people, and I began to realize that she never really cared about me. She simply wanted someone to care for her and then dump once someone better came along. I realized that the reason I fell in love with her was not because of who she was, but what she pretended to be. She had heard about me, knew I was a nice guy, and decided I was empathetic enough to trick. She simply reflected myself back at me, and I thought I was dating someone similar to me, but really I had been dating a narcissist. But this helped me understand a lot about myself, that I care too much, love too deeply, and I need to be careful who I give my love to. Lesson learned. So half a year passed. I hadn't run into her, but I had heard she had moved back to my city with her husband. So much for me being a stalker. Some of my friends had a few run-ins with her, and one embarrassed her by making a sexual innuendo about something she had done. I got invited to a friend's wedding. I couldn't make it to the actual ceremony, but I made it to the reception. I was just finishing writing a small speech to make fun of my friend. Dude had a laugh that was so annoying and loud, you wouldn't believe. I was ending my remarks and was about to sit down when a mutual friend started walking into the room. And who was right behind her? My ex and her husband. I saw her and was a bit surprised. Just as she was about to walk into the room, our eyes met. And in the moment, instead of walking into the room, she pushed her husband back into the hallway out of sight and quickly followed. I was taken back and stepped out to the other side of the building to collect my thoughts and feelings. I was overall fine, but the shock of seeing her was interesting. After a few minutes, I came back into the room and noticed my ex and her husband had never entered the room. I then asked my friend if he invited her, and he said yes. I told him a heads up would have been nice, but he said that he didn't even think about it. He wasn't that close of a friend, more of a mutual friend of one of my best friends. Anyway, minutes passed, and the new couple was about to have their first dance, so we all moved some chairs out of the way. I happened to be on the side of a door when my ex came through, saw I was right next to her, and ran to the other side of the room with her husband being towed behind her. We avoided each other the rest of the reception, except for a couple of glances, but in that moment, I felt whole again. All those months after the breakup, I felt broken and like a piece of myself was missing, but in this moment, seeing how she reacted, how ashamed she seemed to be, I felt my power coming back. I felt truly happy for the first time. Even though she was married and I was not, I had won the breakup. She was ashamed to even look at me. I had no such problems. I had an overall clear conscience. And now here I am, over 4 years after the breakup, writing this. I'm still single, but overall I'm happy. And Maddie, if you ended up reading this, you. I'm the one who ended up finishing university, and you're just a housewife. After all that talk about changing the world, all you're ever going to change are dirty diapers and be a fucking liar and cheater.